Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fadwa Wazwaz, and we wanted to continue with the chapter on Joseph and Jacob from my first published book, which is God Intervening Between a Person and the Heart. And I'm reviewing the themes in that book, and also in the second book, Love is Deeper Than Words, with the current events taking place on Palestine, because there are lessons, there are signs, there are messages. I like to give credit where credit is due. Some of the books that I have used are History of the Prophets of Islam, derived from the Quran, Hadith, and commentaries by Suzanne Hanif. I absolutely love her book. I also like to mention that a good part of this was the commentary, very long, like for the first 40 verses, you could see 4.5 hours. There are many other videos that go more in depth by Sheikh Asharawi. Again, this is 4.5 hours. So it's a very, very long time, and you have to listen to it more than once to make sure you understood the material, because it gives a lot of information that you will have to look into further and further. But I absolutely enjoyed listening to his commentary on the verses from chapter Joseph. Another resource which I am using now, the reason I use it is simply because the scholarly commentary tend to sometimes give you the Bible interpretation, or like where we differ with Christians on certain things, which helps sometimes when you're having a discussion, like let's say the Talmud and the Bible has we differ in certain areas regarding this particular narrative. I also have videos regarding this. As I said, I wrote it in my first book, so I will discuss in here, God intervenes between a person and their heart. I'll be reviewing the dream. I talked about from my YouTube channel. We finished Verily, thy sustainer is all knowing, all wise. And then this has been done a while back from my first book, God Intervenes Between a Person and Their Heart, Lessons from Joseph and Jacob. I explored very strongly one of the names of God that's emphasized in this particular story, which is God the Protector. This story of protection is embedded in the friendship and love, and it helps Joseph strengthen his spiritual muscles. Also makes us cognizant that during trials, God is not like absent or removed from our experiences or far away. He's actually very near. And I will explore that in today's lesson, that during the trial, God is very present, and we should turn to him, again, seeking help, seeking comfort, seeking patience, seeking what we need to be able to pass and to traverse that trial and tribulation. So it isn't that he's removed, or where is God, he's absent, or he's not hearing us. He's very much active, responding in ways that we do not perceive. But we'll see through the story how at times the messages and the signs are there. We are just not aware of them. But if we look at how the training takes place with Joseph and Jacob, we will see sometimes those signs in our life as we are traversing through the trial and tribulation. So I am going to start with looking at her book, Suzanne Hanif, and continuing forth as I move ahead. I will, like I said, try to come in here and discuss some of those verses that she references in the chapter 12 of the Holy Quran, and give like kind of a more in-depth analysis. So let me begin. Indeed, in Joseph and his brothers are signs for the inquiring. This is a translation of verse 7 in chapter 12. After this, the narrative again shifts. Like we said, this is the chapter that actually brings Prophet Jacob upon him peace alive. So it shifts to Jacob and his sons. Now, the focus in this particular section is going to be on Jacob and his sons, not Joseph, but Jacob and his sons. And then we'll look at Joseph a bit more. The brothers' speech and manner stand out in harsh contrast to Joseph's innocence and sincerity. Here she kind of dissects it, but let me give you just a rough estimate quickly. Now, Joseph's brothers spoke thus to one another. So there is this conversation that is taking place between the 10 brothers. And Benjamin, so they're saying, truly Joseph and his brother Benjamin, they're referring to his full brother, are dearer to our father than we. Remember, there are 12 brothers, 10, and Joseph and Benjamin, they're all from 4 different mothers, but the same father. Even though we are so many, behold, our father is truly suffering from an aberration. Said one of them. So now they're having this conversation about Joseph amongst themselves without Joseph and Jacob being involved. And a lot of things that you will know about oppression is on individuals, like here we're talking about, they have a misunderstanding. You could see basically they're upset at something. As I mentioned in my book, Love is Deeper Than Words. If you or someone you know feels wronged, there's a process that you can like reach out, seek clarification, seek understanding, bring a independent investigator, mediator to resolve the issues. This is like what a typical, if you will, somebody who's innocent but feels wronged by a third party would go through. Okay? But if you were, I'm talking here about an ill nature, but if someone has an ill nature and Satan has beautified their sins for them, they're not seeking clarity, they're not seeking resolution. What they're seeking is, and one of the ways that you can tell about projection is they seek to eliminate the individual who they see as an obstacle, because they always, when they project, they always turn that person outside as the obstacle to their being righteous, to their fulfilling their values, to their fulfilling their belief system, to their being whatever it is that they're seeking to be. And so that conversation always takes place is that they try to discuss crime, criminal behavior, but where Satan deceives them is the beautification of sin. Excuse me, right here. See the beautification, the blindfold. First, they turn the misunderstanding again into this individual is an obstacle. I cannot be secure unless I kill this person. I can, well, you know, it could be possible that that individual is a criminal, in which case then you would go to, ICC, or you would go to independent mediator, because you can't base it on your own personal judgment. You have to get like independent mediators, independent law enforcement that can judge between both of you, in which case then you set healthy boundaries and you prosecute that individual for the crime they committed. And that's trying to gain security. But when you're having an independent conversation with a group of like mind, like ill will, and you're brainstorming how to kill someone, and then here comes again the beautification of sin, so that you could be righteous people, to marginalize someone so they could be righteous people, so you could fulfill your common values or exercise your freedoms. At the end of the day, righteous people look at this misunderstanding, or they look at this, what is the word I'm trying, like the problem that you're trying to, or the trial you're trying to navigate, as an opportunity to like act on that righteous behavior, or act righteously. Whereas criminal behavior look at trials and tribulations, misunderstanding, whatever, as an opportunity to attack, kill, obliterate someone, incinerate someone, and then they flip-flop and they say, now we want to be righteous people. So they convince themselves the only way they can be righteous, it's like they have no power, no responsibility, no will of their own to act righteously unless they remove this target. So everyone becomes an obstacle and a target. They cannot, for example, like learn to look at this problem as a means to gain like maybe conflict resolution skills, problem solving skills, solving things. They look at every problem and every trial as they need to knock someone down, obliterate someone, incinerate someone, so that they could be righteous people. I already did a video on how Satan beautifies our sins, but you could see that here. You could see it here, how this is how they argue amongst themselves in secrecy. And you see that another place in the Quran where I did a particular post and I wrote about it, about the case for repentance, where a guilty party will have this conversation behind the target's back. They're not inviting them to what they're discussing or how they see the world, so that that individual can respond or Jacob can respond. It's always amongst themselves. It's a cade, where they're colluding with each other, how to overpower, gang up, attack, kill, and, whatever way that they can to remove this obstacle. And then they think that that makes them become righteous people. One of the things that Sheikh Ash'ari said is, depending on like how much evil a group is, they will decide on the worst case scenario. And if there's still some hope of redemption for the group, they will decide on the lesser evil. It's not to say that they didn't do evil. All these cases, all these choices that they're discussing is evil. But it went for the worst case would be slay Joseph, kill him. So sometimes when people are colluding with each other what to do, if they start saying Amalek, and they're acting on Amalek's speech, then it says that such individuals' hearts are very dark and they don't have room for redemption. This is also evil in what they're doing here. Don't slay Joseph, but rather, if you must, put him in the dark. Well, it's also, again, a lesser evil. It's still evil, but a lesser evil. As Sheikh Ash'ari said, this just indicates that there's still some hope for them. And we see that towards the end of the story, for redemption, in that they chose, while they were brainstorming what to do, they chose the lesser evil, not the most evil of what to do to Joseph. So just to kind of note about the conversation that is taking place about Joseph, the beautification of sin, and then how the choice that was made, and what is sometimes indicate, the sign that it indicates to us. And I gave this like in today's times, like how we can look at it. Like, for example, let's just say you want to lobby for a cause. Sure, you can openly try to influence government based on a cause you'd like to promote. But tyranny, and this is what we're referring to here, this conversation is all tyranny. It's cruel and oppressive. Remember, these are members of a clan, so you could think of it as clan government. It's an attempt, cruel, oppressive rule that robs the freedom and rights of others to choose otherwise. Here, who's robbed? Joseph and Jacob. So they made a decision for Joseph and Jacob without their freedom and rights to choose otherwise in that decision that was taking place. You can see this, it was dated on July 15th, but it helps us to explore again, because how sometimes religion is being used and brought into a conflict, and it's used as a way to say, this is divine writ. Likewise, you know, the brothers of Joseph, they were acting. They were also, again, they colored their crime with trying to be righteous people. So this is, again, an indication that we should reflect on if this Amalek speech was by people who were of the nature of the brethren of Joseph, and they somehow signed God's name, making it like righteousness, when in reality, they did not turn to God and try to figure out what is the righteous action in this particular situation to take. They turned to their ego, is how I see it. This is criticism. This is not me taking a bat and knocking them on the head and demanding that they don't believe that, but it's to say they should reflect, given the story of Joseph and what we're seeing now, if this Amalek speech is really by individuals similar in nature and at the level of the soul of the heart to the brethren of Joseph, who turned to themselves, to their egos, you know, to Satan, to try to be righteous. And their decision again was they had to obliterate anyone for they could be righteous people, the beautification of crime. Something that they, for them, can reflect on and have a discussion amongst themselves. But this is how I look at that, at the Amalek speech. I don't see it as from the divine. I see it by individuals who may be akin to the brethren of Joseph. And so here I asked, you know, are Zionists similar to Joseph's brothers or the prophet Joseph, upon him peace? Something again for them to reflect on. Zionist movement is not new. It's pretty much, again, you look at it in at the level of the mind and the soul and the heart, individuals colluding with each other, and they are robbing others of the freedom and rights to choose otherwise, ganging up, overpowering others, making decisions for others. So this is something that happens, you know, throughout history. And we have to recognize, identify their voices in present day events, and recognize when a movement is colored from its very birth to every aspect of it with tyranny, and call it out as tyranny. So I pointed this out. I also mentioned here on November 16, 2016, about love and projection. Here, what I want to focus on when I'm going back in time is this particular area, because we try to prove at times when we are oppressed, we try to prove our humanity to the oppressor, when instead of turning to God, as I mentioned when I began the story, seeking, when I transitioned from the last theme to this theme, instead of turning to God and seeking to be true servants, sincere servants, because how God judges is not the way humans judge. Now, some individuals, when I started to speak about the story, assume that I'm speaking about personal family members. If I have issues with personal family members, I speak to those personal family members directly, or I speak with them indirectly. Through individuals that can take that message and tell them this message is from Fadwa. So I don't rob them again from awareness that I am upset, as I mentioned in here in the beginning of the verses, and this is why I'm upset. And for that individuals to be able to help them understand the issue of miscommunication or misunderstanding. But it's not about, for example, my paternal aunts. I have 3 paternal aunts, one passed away. We lived kind of separately from each other. They grew up in Palestine. I grew up in the US, although I was born in Palestine, but we, our life experiences was not that we were closely interacting with each other. And this is for an issue that has to do with something else. Also, the brothers, this has nothing to do with my brothers as well. So when I'm mentioning this here, I'm talking about the story of Joseph, but what we can learn from it so that we can take it into our lives and try to reflect on, are we acting like the brothers of Joseph? For example, if you deal with community members and you have a disagreement with community members, do you communicate that disagreement using the word I? Or do you beat around the bush and bring some other community member to give unsolicited advice based on assumptions and rumors that they heard? Stuff like that. Do you collude with each other on how to marginalize other community members? Or do you come to an agreement and set healthy boundaries? So it has to deal with, at a community level, can we recognize how we are acting? Are we acting like Joseph's brethren? Or Joseph? At a domestic level, at an international level, if we are seeking peace and we are seeking security, how are we doing it? Are we acting like the brothers of Joseph, or are we acting like Joseph and Jacob? So these are the questions I would like you to explore, because between you and yourself and you and your group, how you act. Do you collude with each other and have this conversation amongst yourself? You may not have the power to kill, but do you have this conversation where you're telling, let's marginalize this person, let's do this, let's, spread this about them, let's, say this. Is this how you, and then you start to say, so that we could be righteous people, then you go up on stage and you give a nice righteous speech, while behind the background, you're engaging in these type of conversations with your tribe and group, which is basically how to knock down somebody or tear down somebody. So you know best how you're interacting, and you can best answer that question. And that's what I'm trying to get at here, because in such cases, if you act like the brethren of Joseph, because they are a clan, you may succeed in making sure that people see you as great. They may like praise you, they may applaud you, you may have reached a certain standing. But this doesn't necessarily mean, depending on your actions here, that you are akin to Joseph in the eyes of God. Remember, Joseph became, I think I put it here. No, not here. Joseph was brought down. Thought I had it maybe here. It's in another verse. I'll have to show it to you. He was brought down to the lowest of the low by Zulaikha. That's why I wrote this. I have to find it. He was brought down to the lowest of the low. So in the kingdom, he was put in prison. And so in the eyes of the kingdom, the eyes of people who had respect, in the eyes of people who had power, influence, he was made the lowest of the low. However, in the eyes of God, he was amongst the righteous. So he was turning to God, but this is who his value was in the eyes of God. So this is the point that I'm trying to get at. So you can tell yourself what kind of actions are taking place behind the scenes. You know, with your group, are you acting like this? And then beautifying these actions with this, the image. You know that best. So let's, having had delved into the conversation, let's proceed with here. So here we're going to dissect that conversation. Joseph and his brother, again, his brother is Benjamin. That's his full brother. They're more dear to our father than we, while we are a clan. Indeed, our fathers in clear aberration. Again, you could see their resentment towards the way the prophet Jacob, upon him peace, was treating the eldest of the clan. Now, if you know something about clan culture, clans tend to be valuing sons, grandsons, you know, the male figures of the clan. So here you're talking about 10 brothers. These are like how clan culture works. Any clan, Jewish, Arab, any clan, the way they function is the male figures are promoted above others. They are seen as like the prize of the clan. So they always get preferential treatment. So it's expected from a clan culture that the eldest sons would be treated with preferential treatment. Every clan culture does that. When you're a prophet, you don't go by the culture and how society functions. You're going by the teachings of God. So here, similar to like Prophet Muhammad's story, again, all these stories of the prophets in the Quran, of course, they reconcile with each other. Here's what it tells us here, while we are a clan. All of these stories reconcile. So Prophet Jacob, he's a prophet. He can't follow clan culture. He's following the teachings of the prophet, the teachings of God that were sent down to God, because he's a prophet of God. And the prophets were taught actually that they have to treat people who are weak, in need more in need of protection, to give them preferential treatment. So that clashes with clan culture. Similar also with nation states. People, if you look in any nation state, they tend to give preferential treatment to armed services, for example, or law enforcement, as we have seen, and less to people who are in most need of protection. And this is why you constantly see this between like different voices within society where people want to take care, like the homeless, or take care of, the elderly, or take care. But again, we're giving money to who? Military industries, or we're giving money to law enforcement and cop cities. So you see the same thing happen in nation states. But again, they had this conversation amongst themselves, and one of them proposed, your father's regard will then be accessible to you. It's another, again, motive. Here they're trying to, not that they're trying to win his love or respect, but again, they're the preferential treatment. And you see that here where people, for example, in nation states try to get influence because he's the member, he's like the president of the United States. You could say Jacob to the clan is like the president of the United States, and people sometimes try to get closer to those there to get preferential treatment. So they're trying to get influence. They're not really concerned about Jacob's well-being or Jacob's love, but they're really looking at it from trying to get influence. A lot of times you see that in power plays, like particularly right now with the convention taking place with RNC or even the Democratic convention. You'll see this power play of everyone seeking to get preferential treatment to gain more influence, but they don't really care about who they're stepping on in the process, who they're backstabbing in the process so that they can get to the top. As if to offer, again, an excuse for their horrendous deed, he has suggested, and after that, you will be righteous people. And here you see, again, I did the video on the beautification of sin. So every criminal has a blindfold where they try to justify and rationalize their sin with some beauty or some way to that they can sell their criminal behavior. We're not really incinerating Palestinians. We're defending ourselves, Well, if you're defending yourself, there's a means and a process. If you're trying to be righteous and defend yourselves, you can do so. You can go to ICC, you can bring international investigators, you can make things open for investigation. There's a process of righteously trying to defend yourself. But when you shove that process, aside and you start having the conversation to kill and incinerate, and then you put on that blindfold and, in the beautification of sin, it's not really self-defense. It's simply, again, beautification of sin. So again, once we get rid of the external cause of unrighteousness, we will automatically become good. Once we destroy this person or destroy that person or marginalize, tear down that person, then we'll go on stage and start preaching whatever value system we claim to be as moral, good, and just. But the problem is we're not using that system that we claim to be moral, just, and good in this misunderstanding, acting, not preaching, but acting as moral, good, and righteous people should. 10 brothers. Here again, I mentioned that in the earlier one where they chose the lesser evil and they agreed on that. So they come now to their father, and here's an important point that I'd like for us to reflect on. Always criminals, they guilt you for not trusting them. Whereas the trustworthy person tries to earn your trust or allow you room to investigate and, have, for example, investigations or be able to look through the evidence and, they allow you the room, the space to investigate and earn their trust. Whereas an untrustworthy person or a criminal person guilts you for not trusting them. And why do they guilt you? Again, this is where the projection comes in. You know, when someone's internal nature is ill-willed, you know, or criminal, and they know they're doing wrong. Like Sheikh Ashar always said, a liar knows they're lying, but they don't want you to know. So they use a lot of guilt, like, you know, making you feel guilty when you can sense, or you know, or you've observed their actions in a way that seemed harmful. And instead of allowing clarity and allowing, you know, a conversation that clarifies the people or the individual's feelings of resentment towards you, they try to guilt you for not trusting them. So you could see that here. Why do you not entrust us with Joseph, while we are indeed his sincere well-wishers? Similar to Satan when he came to Adam, claiming to be sincere well-wisher, that self-praise. You can see that egoism. We are sincere well-wishers. Usually, like if someone said, let me put it for me, like they don't trust me here, like, you know, you don't want to say, well, you have to trust me, I am your sincere well-wisher. You would want to know, why don't you trust, and how can you gain that person's trust? Like, what is it that you need to clarify, or you need to understand to feel, and you need to investigate to feel like you can trust, you know? But here they're making the decision, they're even robbing him of that, like, process of his feelings. You know, they rob you from your feelings, they rob you from maybe your gut instinct, that something about what they're doing, or what I have observed from them, they rob you from that. And again, it's that rob you from the freedom to choose otherwise. So, oh, our Father, why do you not entrust us with Joseph while we are indeed his sincere well-wishers? This question, again, with its reference to trust, indicates the brothers were well aware also that Jacob, upon him peace, knew of their envy. Again, people who have demonstrated actions, and they know that that individual noted those actions, like they noted their hostility, they noted their microaggressions, their behavior that was harmful. Yet again, they're now pouring on top of that, you know, you might say behavior that is unrighteous, guilt. They're making that person feel guilty for even having feelings, which are reasonable feelings to have, of not trusting these individuals. Suggests they might previously have asked also their father to let Joseph go out with them, and they have been refused. But now, with their plot in mind, so they know what they're doing, yet again, they're playing as though they're righteous. It's all an image. It's that issue of, again, pressing him to agree by hiding what's in their mind. While if you can, again, you could see projecting what's in their mind onto him. So instead of feeling guilty with the plot in their mind, they're trying to make him feel guilty by not trusting them. Send him with us tomorrow to enjoy himself and play, and indeed we will be his guardians. Important thing here that I'd like to emphasize is with individuals of a criminal nature, when you negotiate peace or you negotiate boundaries, always notice that whatever they agree or advice they give, they always violate. Let me say it again. Always notice individuals who have ill will, who have a criminal nature, always notice whatever they agree, whatever advice they give, whatever boundary they set, because they could say, we're setting boundaries. They are the ones that will violate. Whatever agreement they make with you, they are the ones that they will violate. So listen to what they say in their own words. Indeed, we will be his guardians. This is the point that you will need to focus on. This is what they agreed. This is what they offered to Jacob. We will be his guardians. And now that we'll let the conversation unfold. The beauty of the Quran is, notice again, each character of the Quran is speaking for themselves. Like, it's not hearsay. Isn't that beautiful? It's not hearsay. It's not someone saying the brothers of Joseph said this, like they were doing amongst themselves. They were engaging in kind of their own, like, egoism, hearsay about Joseph and Jacob. But when God allows the story to unfold, each person speaks for themselves. So that's also something you want to note in the Quran, that he allows each character to confess their own reality and their own internal reality, not just external, by themselves. So he allows them to reveal themselves, who they are, what their internal reality is, by themselves, by their own actions. Whereas they are making decisions about other people and their reality by kaid, by manipulation, by sinful cunning, by speaking on their behalf. So see, kind of note that, because that's where projection and love, you kind of like face each other in the story. That's the theme that I have used for this. Perhaps something of the sort was precisely what Jacob, upon him peace, had meant when he cautioned Joseph against telling his brothers his vision, knowing his son's ill nature. Can that darkness within projected onto Joseph and Jacob. He understood well enough that they had thought of some scheme against the brother who surpassed him also greatly in character and disposition. But he was trapped, and this is something I'd like you to focus on here. What I sense from this story is something that, again, there's also a direct kind of like a hidden conversation that's taking place between Jacob and God. And this is, again, my interpretation. It appears that he was feeling trapped, Jacob, upon him peace. Seeing his sons, the 10, the clan of the elders of the clan, are possibly plotting and planning before this whole dream happened, and they are trying to hurt Joseph and his brother. Notice their envy, he noticed their hostility towards them, and he noticed they're constantly wanting, access to Joseph and Benjamin, and he was feeling pain. So he turned to God, because the prophets are always ever turning to God. This is the way the Quran describes them. And God heard this conversation, or this feelings of him being trapped. I mentioned again, Al-Khabir. He knows like the secrets of secrets in your heart. And so he's probably turning to God, my interpretation, with this feelings of being trapped, and his sons overpowering him, ganging up on him. Now they're 10, even though he's like the leader of the clan, that they are now greater in number. And he's turning to God, wondering how to protect his son Joseph and Jacob, giving this situation, giving this difficulty that he's facing. Now, I'd like you to reflect again, love and projection. Here is love. He's feeling trapped. He's turning, he meaning Jacob, to God. The brothers are feeling resentment toward Joseph and Jacob. They turn to themselves. Again, here's love. He's feeling trapped. By who? By the actions, the scheming, the ill nature of his sons. Here, we're talking about love. He's turning to God with those feelings of feeling trapped, feeling that his son's ill nature are going to harm Joseph. There, the sons are feeling envy and jealousy, but instead of turning to God, where God can kind of correct them and say, well, actually, this is envious, and here, help them to see things correctly, they're turning to each other, they're turning to their ego. And as I said, the ego is Satan's BFF. So here you're seeing projection, and here you're seeing love. Now, God responds to Jacob with the dream. Although the dream came to Joseph, it came to comfort prophet Jacob, upon him peace. And as a way to say to prophet Jacob, I am aware of what is happening. This is why he understood the dream. This is why if you turn to God first in a problem, sometimes as events unfold, you start to see the messages of God unfold to you, because you're having a conversation privately and secretly with God. And as events unfold, you start to see God responding to you in those like hidden messages as things unfold. So when the dream comes, he's feeling trapped. And he sees, and Joseph comes to him with this dream. Jacob recognized the message in the dream, that I understand what you're feeling. I know that you're feeling trapped by your son's ill nature. Now, notice he does not have a discussion with Joseph how to gang up and scheme against the son. That's projection. Here, he's dealing with a problem. He's dealing with an obstacle. He's turning to God, and God doesn't tell him, go obliterate the sons, poison the sons, drop them in the sea, whatever. He sends him a message, but to confirm the message is from God, so it's not from the ego. He sends it to Joseph. So Joseph comes to him with this dream that he had. And it's almost as though God is communicating the very first message sent to Joseph, to Jacob, that I know what you are dealing with internally. I understand your pain, your suffering, your feelings of being trapped. I got you. I am going to take care of Joseph. Trust me. So this is what is happening. Again, there's a problem. Here's how love is unfolding, turning to God. And here's how projection is unfolding. Now you're going to see love face projection. So again, this is all hidden, but anyone who understands the story and reflects on it can recognize why the dream came to Joseph. Refusing their request would only add fuel to their ill will toward Joseph, with perhaps even worse consequences. So he knew he's at a point where now he's in a corner because he's refused and refused and refused, and they're becoming belligerent in wanting to get hold of Joseph. He turned to God. God gave him this dream through Joseph to trust me. I understand what you're going through, and I got it. I got Joseph. Nonetheless, Jacob, upon him peace, being human, we always try this one last attempt. This is human nature. There's nothing to be ashamed of, is that you always wonder, even like with Abraham, when he had the dream regarding his son, he had to come more than once. You always try one last attempt to protect. Again, he's seeking here to protect, not to push his sons, the other ones, out of the picture and push Joseph in power. But he's trying to protect his son while not harming his other sons, who he knows they have an ill nature toward Joseph. Indeed, it saddens me that you should take him, he said, and I fear that a wolf may devour him while you are heedless of him. So again, the dream is the very first message that came to Jacob from Joseph. It came to both of them, but it came to comfort and train Jacob to have beautiful patience and to have full trust. And they respond, again, I gave you the first response from before when they came to request, but here again, something to notice about criminal behavior is they set the judgment of how to judge them. If a wolf were to devour him while we are a clan, we would then indeed be the losers. So this is very important to reflect on as the story unfolds. They made this judgment of themselves. It wasn't Jacob who made the judgment. Again, they set the rules, they set the agreement, they set the judgment, and then they act like, when they violated, they act like the innocent party. So sometimes an individual they're not the one who set the rules, they're not the one who set the judgment, and they're being held by unjust laws, for example. But here, when God wants to show us individuals of a criminal nature, he shows us them, they set the rules, they set the judgment, and then they violate that very same rules that they set and they wrote with their own hands, as well as the judgment that they set and agreed on. It shows you their criminal nature, because sometimes people can set laws that can criminalize others, and those individuals, again, were robbed from the freedom to choose otherwise or to even agree to those laws. But here, when God wants to show us criminals, he shows us them in the Quran. They set the rules. They wrote the rules with their own hands. And they set the judgment of what's a criminal, what's not a criminal, what's a loser, what's not a loser. They will set it and they will violate it. It's just something to note. Look through that when you're reading the Quran, just to show you the beauty of, again, because there are laws, like, for example, that are discriminatory towards the oppressed, but criminals, they write the laws with their own hand and they violate them. So this is where from the brothers, their father said no more, although he realized that terrible events might be in store for his beloved son, but he was powerless to protect him indefinitely from his brother's evil. He felt trapped. This is why the dream came, or indeed from anything else with which his Lord might see fit to test him. At the same time, Joseph's vision had made it clear that a very special future lay ahead of him. Because of this, Jacob, upon him peace, possessed the assurance that no matter what troubles might befall Joseph during his life, he must reach that exalted rank that had been promised through his vision. So regardless of the trials and sufferings that might come to the dearest of his sons and to himself, loving that son as he did, the final outcome arranged by his Lord would be for the best. So here he's being nurtured and trained to have trust. This is not something that comes from the ego, this is something that comes from God. So you could see the messages coming to Joseph and Jacob, training them to have trust, to have hope, as well as to have patience. Even though the separation and sorrow would now come upon him and his beloved Joseph, nothing could destroy Jacob's certainty and trust in God's wisdom and mercy. And he surrendered himself inwardly to whatever the all-wise Lord might decree. So there's that mystery. He doesn't have the full details. He just knows that he's being told to surrender. He's being nurtured by God, those signs and messages to surrender. I have a plan. I'm well aware of their nature. I have a plan in store. The following day, the treacherous brothers, they took the unsuspecting Joseph on their outing. Presently, they seized him, They stripped him of his shirt and they put him into the bottom of the well, where they left him to his fate. And they stained his shirt with the blood of an animal they had killed as evidence to their father that he was really dead. Something to note here is, again, the issue of stripping. Usually individuals of a criminal nature, they always like to pounce. What are clothes for? Like we all, for example, I did a video on, keep your clothes on, but what kind of anatomy you have, male or female. Clothes tend to represent dignity in Islamic culture, as well as nobility. So you have, and it teaches us that when you engage others, you should engage them with dignity and nobility, because clothes are aimed to hide what? They're aimed to hide the flaws, but they also aim to hide the scars. Like if you're wearing clothes according to Islamic standard, they hide the scars, they hide the flaws, they hide things that usually people of a criminal nature pounce on to justify their criminal behavior. So you could think of that they stripped him, as a way of trying, in a similar way of like trying to like pounce on him for what that clothes is hiding, which is that, for example, his youth, he's still a young lad, is an unprotected group. So they pounce on that. So when someone kind of takes off the clothes, the reference here, clothes represent nobility and dignity. Always look at who's doing the stripping to see who's being stripped. Because when they are stripping him, they are actually exposing their own naked evil. When they are stripping Joseph, they are actually exposing their own naked evil. Somebody who's like righteous is going to say, they're not going to say who's stripped, like who has their shirt off. They're going to say who stripped the person. A righteous person is going to say who stripped them, versus somebody who's non-righteous is going to say, aha, look at the scars and flaws. Someone who's righteous, as I mentioned, like, for example, if a woman was drunk, okay, and she and someone like, took advantage of that. A righteous person would see a woman drunk, like let's just say in the street, they'd call the ambulance and they might cover her up, because why? Because you give what you own. They're full of dignity and nobility, so they give dignity and nobility. An unrighteous person would take advantage, because clothes represent nobility and dignity. That means when you cover people, you're covering not just their flaws, but their scars or wherever it is that you're not supposed to be looking there anyway, because you want to engage the individual nobility and dignity. So when they stripped him of his shirt, their aim was to strip him of his nobility and dignity, given the status that he had with his father. But in reality, they actually ended up exposing their naked evil. And I did a video on that. Look who stripped. I try to help individuals to recognize, like if you wanted someone to live next door to you, if someone forcefully stripped an individual, you don't mind that individual living next door, because Islam already says lower your gaze, so you're not going to be looking there anyway. Whereas if somebody did the stripping, you look at that's the person who's not honorable, and you don't want that person next door. So while they may think like they have humiliated him, in reality, they have humiliated themselves. A righteous person looks at things with a different set of lens than an unrighteous person. An unrighteous person is looking at the scars, they're looking at the flaws, whereas a righteous person is saying, put the clothes on. I'm not supposed to be looking there. Okay, so that's something to note about when and you're engaging others? Do they notice the flaws and scars, or do they speak with people with nobility and they speak with people with dignity? So they come to their father at night. Again, they're coming at night. And Sheikh Sha'rawi discusses this. Again, it's that issue of, similar to how the conversation started amongst the brothers, they're conversing with themselves behind the target's back. It's always hidden. The conversation is hidden when they're discussing Joseph and Jacob. The plot in their mind is hidden when they're asking, their father to give them Joseph. And now their false tears and the shirt that they come with, they bring it at night. Always that hidden their criminality is always hidden. You see that throughout the story, that the way they engage, the way the way they act, the way they even shed tears, it's all hidden. Our father, they cried, indeed we went racing and left Joseph with our things, and a wolf devoured him. Then, observing Jacob's disbelief, they added, but you would not believe us even if we were truthful. And to convince him that they were not lying, so you could see again the manipulation, they produced his shirt with false blood upon it. Now remember their agreement, they are his guardians. They were supposed to, here now they left Joseph, but they told Jacob, we are his guardians. So why, if you made an agreement that you are his guardians, then why did you leave Joseph? So you see how they set an agreement and they violated. Another thing is, they said, if anything happens to Joseph, we are losers. They set, again, a judgment of how to judge certain actions and behavior, but still they violated. Now again is that guilt. But you would not believe us even if we are truthful. That's not how a righteous person would say. If you made an agreement and you made a judgment, you would say, our father, we said, we are his guardians. And if anything happens to him, we are losers. Please forgive us. Please, have mercy on us. We are truly, if you do not forgive us and have mercy on us, we are losers. They don't come the way Prophet Adam came to God, because that story tells us how to listen and read others. So when someone is guilting you that you don't trust them, it's a sign that there's a plot in their mind, when they're violating the agreement they made with Jacob, and they're violating the judgment, the lens with which they see their actions. And now they're guilting you instead of acknowledging that they were the ones who violated the agreement, and they were the ones who violated even the very way that they judge such actions that they engaged. So instead of, it's kind of like a lack of remorse. Instead of feeling remorseful, they're guilting Jacob for the criminal behavior that they engaged in, for not believing their lies, for not believing their deception, manipulation. So you could see that guilt, and I did a whole video on that as well. So you could imagine now Jacob's feelings at this point, his terrible anxiety over Joseph's unknown fate, and had his brothers then killed him, so that this blood, was it really his? So try to put yourself in Jacob being trapped, turning to God, trying one last attempt to protect his son. And something bad about these individuals, you're being nurtured to trust. Try to kind of like just sit with Jacob for a moment here, as he's like reconciling all of these events that are unfolding. He surrendered to God, expecting what? Expecting, the best outcome to happen. But then here, something bad happens. He lost Joseph. So try to sit with Jacob as he's dealing with all these feelings that are happening to him. Go here. So clear, and although he was their father and a prophet, he had no power to deal with them. That feeling of powerlessness. They were 10 of them, acting as a body in their wickedness, entirely out of his control, impelled by the worst of all ill feelings and envy. Still he's the head of the clan. He could hype up, other individuals and attack them. But again, he's here not turning to himself. He's turning to God. And Jacob, upon peace, already understood and accepted the fact some calamity would befall his son Joseph. But the brothers claimed that a wolf had eaten him after his saying to them the previous day, I fear that a wolf may devour him while you are heedless of him. And their reply, if a wolf were to devour him while we are a strong clan, then we would indeed be losers. So they took his fears and explanation of, he's here trying to seek understanding with them, and they took that understanding or clarification or attempt to protect, and they used it against him. They even violated their own judgment that if they were to fail in their ability to protect Joseph, they would be indeed losers. So instead of recognizing they were losers and seeking, feeling remorseful and regretful and saying we are deeply remorseful for what happened, they're making Joseph feel guilty. So their behavior, you could see, is not ringing true. As for the shirt, obviously a wolf doesn't devour a person and leave his shirt behind. At the same time, there was Joseph's vision like a bright beacon of hope, assuring him that his dearest son would live to see a distinguished future. Now, I did one in the book on Love is Deeper Than Words on hope. Again, hope comes from God. It's not from the self. You can't kind of feed it. But if you turn to God, the seeds of hope will be nurtured in your heart. And it doesn't necessarily mean a dream, but you will start, once you turn to God, he will send you either through people, through dreams, whatever it is, but you will see messages and messages unfold, but just keep turning to God. Whatever the case might be, something deep, devious, and terribly wicked was afoot, although Jacob, upon him peace, could not know what. So something bad happened to Joseph, but not this. And if not this, then what? What he's also trained here is impatience. Remember when he's trained in trust, trained in hope, trained in patience. He gave an answer and God taught him through that answer that one of the things we learn also from this as an interplay of events in Joseph and Jacob's story is how not to explain yourself to individuals that are hiding the truth about themselves. Let me say it again. Don't explain yourself to individuals who are hiding the truth about themselves. Why? They will use those explanations as arrows against you, as we have seen. The explanation that Jacob used to the one last attempt to protect Joseph upon his peace was used as a weapon against him. And here, Jacob upon his peace is being trained to trust God in a higher ways and to have patience in higher ways by not offering an explanation to his sons. Not because he didn't want to come to a clear understanding, but because, as has been unfolded, that they have turned to themselves. They didn't turn to God. No, but your lower selves have enticed you to something. While he turned to God, and God is nurturing him toward patience, hope, and trust, they turned to their lower selves. So here, love versus projection. And the noble prophet said to his son, surrendering his will and purpose to his Lord, therefore, patience is most befitting, and God is the one sought for help against that which you describe. And so when you see, when you hear whatever you say is being distorted, twisted, or used as a weapon against you, it's that issue of the shirt, where people are using it against you, like they're looking at his vulnerability, which is his fear for Joseph. They use that against him. They're looking for your insecurities, your fears, your flaws, your scars. Don't offer explanations to such individuals. Their nature is similar to people who turn to their lower selves. And the best thing to do is just don't offer them explanations. Turn to God instead. God is the one sought for help against that which you describe. Now I'm about to end this. We're going into now what is taking place and how Joseph is being nurtured. And they schemed, again, it's that scheme, and we talked about it. And God is also, he's very present in this trial and tribulation. As we have seen what happened to Jacob, it's the word, from his the event, bad things happened. It was not like when God is present, it means only like, the brothers were hit with a tornado and then they died. And then, bad things happened to Joseph, but that bad thing God is using to elevate him in rank. So it's to recognize they schemed, and God too was plotting and planning, and he's very present in the trial and tribulation to Joseph and to Jacob. Both of them turned to God, and he's present to both of them in the trial, nurturing them to have hope, to have trust, to have patience. I got your back. Remember, the dream came also to Joseph, but it came to Jacob because he's the elder. He's the one feeling trapped, to comfort his soul as the separation is taking place. I got Joseph. I got his back. So the young Joseph remained in the bottom of the well. We can imagine his state of mind and his horrendous betrayal by his brothers, because his father never told him like your brothers are evil or, anything. He just said Satan might sow, sedition between you. We can also imagine the pain he must have felt for his beloved father's grief. Because he was of a nature that he was concerned about the feelings of his father. He was very loving toward his father, whereas the brothers were like more interested in the influence they may gain from him being a prophet, and they wanted to be like getting that influence that he can give them as the head of the clan. In that desperate and troubled state, the divine revelation came to his heart. Again, you could see that Joseph is turning to God. Jacob is turning to God. The 10 brothers are turning to their lower selves. And this is the message that Joseph received. You will surely inform them about this affair of theirs while they do not perceive. Thus did his Lord comfort Joseph in his sorrow and relieve him of his fear and dread at his unknown future, supported by the promise of a blessed outcome shown to him in his vision. So again, the prophets always turning to God, and the most loving Lord is always nurturing them. He's very present. He's not like removed from the event. He's very present, nurturing them. Trust, patience, hope. So you could see the hope here that it's reported that Joseph, upon him peace, stayed in the well for 3 days and 3 nights. Then at the time decreed by God, there came a company of travelers in an Egyptian caravan. They sent their drawer of water to the well, and he let down his pail, catching hold of the rope Joseph upon peace was pulled out. Good news, exclaimed the drawer of water when he saw the extraordinarily handsome boy. Here is a lad. According to the interpretation of the classic commentators, the treacherous brothers now appeared and demanded payment for Joseph. So it's like, what is letting us know just the lack of remorse for 3 nights and 3 days. They had an opportunity to have second thoughts and come back and pull Joseph from the well. But they kept watch over the well to see who would pull him out of the well, to make sure that he does not return. And when they saw someone appeared and took him out of the well, so it means like 3 days and 3 nights, Joseph was in the bottom of the well, and they were there like keeping watch. It's not like very present in the story, but you could sense, because as soon as someone came, pulls him out of the well, they show up and demand payment. And they sold him to the people of the caravan for a low price and a few dirhams. So God is showing us the degree, again, their nakedness became, their ill nature became exposed. So when God wants to reveal someone's criminal behavior, it doesn't come through hearsay. It always comes by their own actions, revealed by themselves. Like no one is telling them, do this. They themselves are doing it. They themselves are colluding privately with others, agreeing to this criminal action. So, and it also shows like, if it was a passion, like remember when I mentioned in the last theme, Moses accidentally killed a soldier and then he swiftly turned to God and sought repentance. Did not only not seek repentance, but for 3 days and 3 nights is a reference, not that God left Joseph, but it's a reference to the degree of criminality of his brothers, that they knew he was there and yet had not a shred or a hairline of remorse or like thinking our brother, just to show you how much animosity they had toward their brother, that knowing that he's at the bottom of the well for 3 days and 3 nights, and they never made an attempt to save him. The lack of remorse is the emphasis here. 3 days, 3 nights in the well. And God is kind of giving them an opportunity to say, this is wrong, to feel remorse. You know how sometimes like someone like instigates you, it could be like a sibling rivalry, where you say something out of passion, but then like, 5 minutes later, you regret it. And you know what I mean? But that's not what happened here. It's showing you how premeditated and how calculated and how much lack of remorse they had after putting Joseph in the well. 3 days, 3 nights, and no attempt to save him, knowing he's there in the dark, a young lad, and yet no mercy, no compassion. It reminds me of, Gallant when he said, no food, no water, like one's complete. This is that mentality of no mercy, no compassion, nothing. They can see someone suffer, and it's just, again, no conscience that moves them to say, let me save Joseph. And as soon as a caravan comes, then they demand payment for Joseph, and they sold him to the people of the caravan for a low price and a few dirhams. And here the divine author of the book adds parenthetically, and they were of those satisfied with little regarding him. Again, is that in whose eyes do you seek your self-worth? Because if Joseph sought his self-worth through the eyes of his brothers, they had very little regard for him. Criminals do not have regard for those they oppress. So the lesson here and the message here for anyone who's oppressed, don't seek your respect, love, dignity, humanity through the eyes of those who are oppressing you. They have, of course, they have very little regard for you. So don't, to begin it off, don't seek your honor or your respect or your dignity through their eyes. And don't measure it through their eyes. Like if they're pleased with you, then you're pleased with yourself, because they have very little regard towards those they oppress. This is why I began with the name Al-Aziz in the book, Love is Deeper Than Words. Again, it's either they're eager to get rid of him, why they've done this, or because they held him in such low esteem, and it's actually both in my interpretation. It's said that they followed behind him, saying to those who brought him from them, make sure he doesn't escape. So this is how much, again, how much lack of remorse, how much, the lack of consciousness about the criminal behavior they're engaged in, until they had safely reached Egypt with him. So they kept following the caravan, making sure that he does not escape. They don't want him to come back, because then they will be exposed in front of their father, and their plan would fall apart. But this is how much effort they made and how much premeditation and calculation to engage in their criminal actions. The men who brought up Joseph concealed him as merchandise, meaning as a treasure they had found, for they supposed that if the others in the caravan knew about him, they would demand a share in his price when he was sold as a slave once they reached Egypt. And again, here the emphasis in verse 19 that God, again, mentions to us, and God was knowing of what they did. So he's not absent. All of these events that are unfolding, God is well aware and very present in these trials and tribulations that we are experiencing, guiding and directing every movement and supporting the frightened, grieving Joseph upon in peace throughout his ordeal with his mercy and tender love. So again, Joseph was turning to God and receiving this messages from God for comfort in his heart, and for trust, for patience. So he's turning to God and receiving this light upon light upon light from God. The 10 brothers turned to their lower selves. And I'm about to finish. Thus it was that, hidden from the others in the caravan, Joseph, upon a peace, entered Egypt. There he was bought by one who recognized his value. So somebody who, he had a need. Based on the need, the person might upgrade their recognition of who you are. But you're still now went from being a slave to being, property, you could say. Or being from, in the case of the people of the caravan, we went from being commodity to sell, to being a slave, to now being, you could possibly say they could be an adopted son or someone who can benefit us, maslah, some object of interest. So here he was brought by one who recognized a man of power and prestige. So he upgraded his value, referred to in the Quran as Al-Aziz, a title meaning the exalted one. And this is the Potiphar mentioned in Genesis, Potiphar, maybe. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it's mentioned in the Bible in Genesis 37. It is said he had a high-ranking official in charge of the Egyptian treasury. Joseph's master brought his newly acquired slave boy to his home in the capital city of Egypt. Make his stay honorable, he said to his wife. Perhaps he may benefit us, or we may adopt him as a son. And here God Most High adds, and thus did we establish Joseph in the land, that we might teach him. So again, these is the signs and the teaching and the nurturing, again, to a higher level of faith, a higher level of understanding the interpretation of events. This is what it feels, this is how turning to God unfolds, events unfold, how faith unfolds. And God is predominant, that while all of this is happening over his affair, but most people do not. That he chose this process for Joseph, and it's a process of being elevated. And I'll mention here a slight video by one of scholars I respect a lot. And so he's being elevated to a high purpose. Whereas those who turn to their lower selves, they engaged in crimes, they beautified, they put a blindfold, means that they kind of forgot their crimes. They put a blindfold that beautified their crimes in their eyes and then the eyes of the world. But they ended up harming themselves because they feel no remorse. No, they're morally bankrupt, and they could see no mercy, no compassion, nothing. Like he's there 3 days and 3 nights, no mercy, no compassion, nothing for for Joseph. So here's again love and projection. You saw the interplay of Joseph and Jacob who turned to God and how the events unfolded, and the brothers of Joseph who turned to their lower selves and how they controlled events, yet became morally bankrupt. Their criminal nature, which was in their heart, now became naked. Although they thought they were stripping, they actually stripped themselves. It became naked. They became, even though they were aware of it, they showed lack of remorse, lack of compassion, lack of mercy. You can say like they had a blindfold on, and they were thinking that they were being righteous by that criminal action, by trying to beautify their sin. So to get to here, I can take it as a scholar. He's saying, I'll just translate it for you.
أن تريد، لا، القضية هي ماذا تريد، هي ماذا تريد. وأصبح في مستويات عديدة من الإرادة. ممكن تبقى رغباتك وإرادتك كلها في منطقة الشهوة الأكل وشهوة الجنس وعايش كالبهيم، رغبتك ما تتخطاش من كده. ممكن تتجاوز الحكاية دي، تبقى لك آفاق جمالية عاطفية، وممكن بعد كده يبقى لك استبصار رغبة وإرادة للفضائل والأعمال الصالحات، وبعدين ممكن تبقى وإلى ربك ترغب في وجه ربك سبحانه وتعالى. فالمسألة مستويات. يبقى أنت اللي يطلبه منك الإسلام مش إنك تلغي إرادتك، إنما تعلو بها، العلو بالإرادة، استشراف مراتب أعلى، منازل أعلى من مطلوباتك. بدل ما تطلب مطلوبات خسيسة، اطلب مطلوبات أعلى فأعلى. بدل ما تحب الجميل، حب الجمال، وأحسن من الاثنين إنك تحب رب الجمال. يعني شوف هنا مستويات، إنك تحب الشيء وبعدين تحب الشيء المجرد وبعدين تحب رب كل المجردات والمجسمات. الإسلام ينظر.
So just to give you like a paraphrasing of what he says, what are you seeking? You know, we saw like what the brothers were seeking. We saw what Joseph and Jacob were seeking. What are you seeking is an important question that you need to ask yourself, because our ego and desires will respond accordingly. And they are all part of ourselves, and our God doesn't ask us to like destroy our ego or to not have any desires. But what are you seeking? And to try to make sure that in doing so, when you recognize what it is you're seeking, that the components of ourselves, they determine our behaviors and decision by aligning our will, ego, and desires with what God wishes, as I showed with Prophet Jacob, Prophet Joseph, turning to God, then we can achieve spiritual progress. But they were going through the spiritual progress, spiritual elevation of rank in God's eyes, ultimately eternal contentment and tranquility. Or they can, again, if they turn to their lower selves, they can then descend, you know, into a station that might get us into actions, behavior, lack of mercy, lack of compassion, or actions that might push us more and more to descend into hellfire. So again, what are you seeking is an important question. It's like a stop sign before you start to act. What are you seeking? And to reflect on that so that you can understand how these components of ourselves will be used to either make us advance to the afterlife or descend into hellfire. This is a Dar al-Salam, means station of peace. There's other videos that will be continuing with the story. I hope this was beneficial. Thank you very much. It took me more than once to do this because I ran into technical issues. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.